Hi, everyone. Welcome. My name is Kristen Skelton, and I'm the founder of Bud Funding, a social enterprise dedicated to sustainable education. Every Wednesday, I go live in Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, and I'm sharing everything from sustainability hacks, tips, tricks, and sometimes I even have guests with me, like I do today. I have Madison from Carbon Upcycling Technologies, and I've had the privilege of working with her two other times. She's been a speaker at our past sustainability expos. She's been with us in the Bud Club, and now I have her here live with me. And how are you today, Madison?
I'm good. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, it's great you're doing such exciting things, and we're going to dive right in. And it's great to you guys are always doing more things, and I'm always learning from you guys. So I just love, connecting with you. And so before we dive right into the meat of what we're going to get into today, I'm curious what was your path that brought you to the industry that you're currently working in? And how did you start working at Carbon Upcycling Technologies as their chief of staff?
Yeah, I've always been interested in environmental work. I'm born and raised in Calgary, so being really close to the mountains, I've always enjoyed hiking, and my family always made a point of ensuring that nature was a part of our lives growing up. So I think that was the passion that was instilled in me from a very young age. And I jumped into carbon upcycling kind of by accident, actually. I applied for a really relaxed administrative role when I was in my last year of university and thought I could kind of just drift to the end of graduation. But working at a startup is not like that at all. So it was kind of intense. I would cut class and go give pitches, and I fell in love with it right away. So it was a lot of fun that way. And I decided to do more business development work after that instead of the admin. That's really not what the role ended up being, and it kind of just grew from there. Being with such a small team and the scale up we were doing for the Carbon X Prize, that resulted in me getting a chief of staff position.
Very cool. And if you're with us, you can put any comments in below. Just let us know if you're here. And if you have questions, put them in below and we can answer your questions as they come in. So now let's jump right into it. So what is the carbon capture, utilization, and storage industry?
Yeah, it's a really interesting industry. You've probably seen it in the news a bunch lately, especially with the new carbon capture prize that is sponsored by Elon Musk. But essentially, there's three portions to that. So there's the capture, that's taking CO2 either from just the atmosphere, so through direct air capture, or from point source emissions. And then there's a utilization piece, that's using the CO2 in value-add end products and selling them off into just the regular market as products. That's what we do. And then there's storage, so that's storing CO2 permanently underground.
And are all carbon capture, utilization, and storage techniques effective in reducing carbon emissions?
They all have their place, but there are some that are more interesting or intriguing than others for different factors. So the industry that we're interested in primarily is utilization, because that takes CO2 and actually gives it either some performance benefits as a material, or we're able to sell it into a marketplace and make carbon capture and utilization economically viable as a climate solution. So effectiveness is also about the adoptability of the technology and whether or not it is sustainable in an economic sense, because we still do live in a very capitalist society and you have to take those factors into consideration. So yeah, there's many different criteria that come into play when determining how effective a climate solution is. But absolutely, I think there is some variability in whether or not there's effective solutions.
And how is carbon utilization better or different from carbon sequestration underground?
Yeah, so when you're storing CO2 underground, a lot of times you maybe see reports about it being used in enhanced oil recovery, which is using more fossil fuels, it's fine. It's just a different technique of doing the same type of recovery they would probably do anyways. but you're really not having a value add to that CO2. You're not putting it into a product, or you're not creating any economic value out of that. And utilization does exactly that. So it takes the CO2 that we were going to use anyways or put underground and makes it into a product that can then be sold and essentially make products a carbon sink. So this is anything from infrastructure and the materials that go into buildings, to your plastics, to fuels, alcohol. There's so many different ways to use CO2 in products that we're using in our daily lives.
And now let's get into the company that you work for. What is Carbon Upcycling Technologies?
So Carbon Upcycling Technologies is a Canadian carbon utilization technology company. So we take gaseous CO2 and we sequester it into inorganic solid powders. Right now we're based at a natural gas plant. So we are taking point source emissions, and we're based there because that was the area for the Carbon X Prize. That's where it was located. So we've been taking that CO2, embedding it directly into different powders. And then from there, we sell them off as additives to many different industries, from concrete and plastics to pharmaceuticals, solar panels, batteries. It's really, really broad. And then we've even started a consumer product line. So it's really interesting to see what we've been able to do with the CO2 in that sense. We do also have a carbon capture technology that we did a tech transfer on from a university in the States. So that's something we'll be demonstrating as well, but that will also be a point source emission capture.
And people might be a little interested about the X Prize. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, for sure. So X Prize was really, really exciting opportunity for us. It's been about 5 years that we've been in the competition, and they started off with hundreds and hundreds of applicants, and then narrow it down to semifinalists and finalists. So we were a top 10 finalist in that, and there were 5 teams scaling up here in Calgary and 5 teams in Wyoming. So there ended up being 2 separate tracks of competitors, meaning that they've also split the prize in half. So it was a $20 million prize. Which was one of the largest competitions that X Prize has hosted to date, not counting this new 100 million prize, which has just been announced. But it allowed us to scale pretty rapidly. We actually scaled our technology over 1 million times in 5 years. So having that ability to have a reactor go from the size of a cookie jar to something producing 20 tons of material in a batch has been an amazing process.
Wow, 100 million times. That's amazing.
Yeah.
And what was the goal of that competition?
So the whole goal of the Carbon X Prize is to showcase how you can use CO2 in different end products. So it's all about the utilization. So this next prize that they're doing is on capture, and that's going to be using both natural solutions as well as industrial or innovative. This one was mostly innovation. There weren't really many utilization processes using natural solutions. So basically, it's just looking at 2 factors: the economic viability, as well as how much CO2 we can actually use and fully sequester into the products that we're producing and selling.
Very cool. And what is the impact of this technology from a greenhouse gas reduction standpoint?
It has a really interesting impact. Not only are we sequestering CO2 into the powders, which are then going into end products like concrete and plastics, but we're also offsetting the synthetic or carbon-intensive materials that are already in those products. So the best example I can give of this is our concrete additive. Essentially, how that works is we first embed fly ash. Fly ash is it's a byproduct of coal incineration plants, but we take it from very low-grade material that's sitting in landfill. We embed it with the CO2, and then we're even able to replace up to 20% of cement in a concrete mix, which is the most carbon-intensive portion and most expensive piece of concrete. And that reduces the greenhouse gas footprint of concrete manufacturing by up to 25%. So you can see the twofold factor of carbon reduction there, both from the CO2 sequestered as well as replacing cement.
Mm-hmm. And lots of people don't actually know how much CO2 cement produces. Like it's kind of crazy. Yeah, a lot.
Yeah.
And who can use Carbon Upcycling Technologies products?
Pretty much anyone. I mean, each product line is is, I guess, specific to a use case. So for our concrete additive, if you have concrete products or projects that you have on the go, we'd be happy to just supply our material into that. But we primarily focus on concrete manufacturers. For our plastic additives, again, if you have some projects on the go, we'd be happy to chat. But that's more into injection molding and different types of plastic projects that are, with bigger manufacturers. And then for our consumer product line, that's everyone. So that's something that we started to showcase how consumers can be a part of carbon tech, and really showcase that they want to see these materials being used in the wider industry and in all of the products that they're purchasing.
And so that's called Expedition Air, is that correct?
Yeah, that's called Expedition Air.
Okay, cool. And what kind of products are you guys currently hosting there?
Yeah, we have quite a range of products that we're selling, and they're not all just carbon upcycling materials. So we've been partnered with another Calgary company called Clean02. They make soap. So we wanted to showcase that carbon tech companies can be collaborative and work together and support each other's missions, because it is a wider goal of mitigating climate change, and the most effective way is for us to work together and collaborate in that sense. So we do have other materials represented and other carbon tech companies, but like I mentioned, so there's soap, there's planters made from concrete, we've got crayons, we've got t-shirts, we've got even paintings. We have some really cool artists that we're working with, and we do run an artist in residence program. But yeah, one of the painters that we were working with this past year, he took some of our graphitic nanoplatelets, which are very, very dark powder. He made paint out of it, and then he makes these negative paintings. So you use a filter on it to see the painting flip to positive color. And it just really puts a cool spin, I guess, on carbon negative.
Wow, that's very cool. And did I see crayons as well?
Yeah, so that was the last artist in residence that we worked with. Well, I should say she was our first artist in residence, so she's the only one so far. But she made a bunch of cool things. So those are actually made from beeswax that she harvests herself. So she has bees on her roof. She has hives, and she takes the beeswax, mixes it with our powder and a few other things, and some earth pigment. So she made the whole thing very natural. And yeah, these are crayons that you can purchase. And she's also working on watercolor paints and stuff like that. So she started, because of our artist in residence program, she started her own business called Captured Carbon Studio. And it's all of these artists and different, I guess, mediums that you can use from captured carbon in your own artwork.
That is so, so cool. And I really like one thing you said about collaboration, because I really think collaboration is one of the keys to a sustainable future.
Mm-hmm.
And for conscious consumerism, so conscious consumerism is an important aspect of mitigation, climate change. How can we support without purchasing products?
Yeah, there's so many different ways. I think, being aware of what you need and not purchasing outside of your means that way to support climate change is super, super important. But also supporting products that are made sustainably, obviously, is really key too. Being a small company, of course, anything you do in terms of sharing content or sharing our message is really key that way with your networks and getting the message out there. And then I guess if you wanted to take it a step further, it's really important to make sure you let brands know that you want these types of materials to be used in the products that you're already purchasing. Because the most sustainable way for companies like ours to make a really big difference is to tap into supply chains that are already existing and to sales channels that are already there. Rather than starting from ground up, we can work with companies that already have these built out and just swap out the material. It can be fairly simple like that. Of course, there's nuances to it and a lot of work that goes on behind the scenes to make sure it's technically validated. But making sure you put a little bit of pressure on these companies to actually select materials that are made from CO2. That's really where you get the large carbon footprint reduction. And of course, we know that buying one consumer product really isn't going to change the world, but all of us coming together to support that mission and that passion going forward, I think that's really how we're going to make a big difference.
Absolutely. And when you mentioned the artists using powders, when it was powder, is it fly ash? were you referring to?
Some of them have used fly ash. So our first artist in residence, Anna Lee, she used fly ash in the worry stones that she created. But we've also used graphitic nanoplatelets. I think that's the one they've used most. So those are graphite based, and then they've also used talc powder.
Okay, so the graphite is more for the artistic materials like the paints and that kind of stuff, and then the fly ash would be more for like something concrete, like a stone or something more physical.
Yeah, exactly. And then we've also used CO2 embedded talc powder because the graphitic nanoplatelets are very dark. So if you put them in anything, it changes whatever medium you're using to black. So if they wanted to add color to it, like the earth pigments and things like that, they would use talc powder because it's just an off-white, and then you can add more pigmentation to it if you wanted to. So there's so many different materials we can use. Any inorganic solid powder is up for grabs for what we can process. For the most part, there's some technical nuances there, of course, but I remember I used to make face masks for myself, and I had some clay at home, and I realized I could probably process this and work on a cosmetic application. So I took that to work and we processed it in the reactors, and we are still working on a cosmetic application as well. So it's really, really broad. Yeah.
That's really cool. So would you say those are your 3 main products?
Yeah, for the powders for sure. And we've also been working on crushed glass as well from construction sites. So that's something that's been interesting. You can pulverize glass down until it's a powder, and then we can embed it with the CO2 at that point. And that can be used in both the concrete and the plastics industries. So that one's kind of earlier stage, but definitely something that we're working on for sure.
That's really neat. So you could embed it with the CO2 and then use it to create concrete. So you would be using that to lower the amount of concrete you would need. Is that right?
The amount of cement use, yeah.
Sorry,
yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly, though. Mm-hmm.
That's really cool. Okay, so that's a future product or future project. Any other kind of neat future projects on the works?
Yes, we're focusing more on natural pozzolans now rather than industrial waste. Of course, industrial wastes are important because a lot of them do just sit in landfill, and we're able to use those and upgrade them so that they can be reintroduced. And it's very much an upcycling and recycling type of I guess economy or model that we're using. But we want to also focus on natural pozzolans and the natural resources that we have. So if there is mining that's happening, for instance, with graphite's a great example. There's types of graphite that, even though it's mined, those materials are kind of viewed as a byproduct. They're still graphite, but just so low grade, they can't be used often. So we're looking for those types of materials too on a more natural side of things, so that we're not necessarily always supporting the industrial industries.
Mm-hmm. Wow, that's really cool, and I'm really excited for you guys. So just to circle back here, so is fly ash your biggest product?
Yeah, that's the biggest one. The concrete industry in general is massive. So concrete itself is the second most used substance on Earth other than water, which if you think about it, is just insane. It's just crazy. And it's a large emitter. It's a very large emitter because of the cement use. So that's why we've been focusing on fly ash and upcycling that and embedding it with the CO2 so that any buildings or infrastructure that's put in place has the CO2 directly embedded in it, and it won't be released to atmosphere.
Very cool. Okay. And then fly ash, do you know the ratio of how much fly ash to cement you'd be able to use? Or just like, is it a lot, or like, I don't need an exact ratio. I'm just curious, like if it's a good amount or.
Mm-hmm. It's quite a bit. I mean, fly ash itself has been used in the concrete industry for ages, but not with the type of pretreatment we've been doing. Yeah. So typically, you can get anywhere from like a 60-40 mix, 40% being cement, and we can reduce that even further with our type of fly ash that we're adding. So that's kind of where we're at with that. I don't have the exact results for what it would be used in Canada.
I was just curious if it was like a medium amount or a lot amount. No, that's really cool.
Yeah, it's quite a lot. Yeah.
Madison, thank you so much for joining me today. I'm always learning. You guys are always doing really, really cool things. If you guys have any questions, you can put them below and we'll answer them later. And of course, if you want to connect with Carbon Upcycling Technologies, Madison, what's the best way to connect with you or the team there?
Yeah, for sure. We have all of our contact information on our website, so carbonupcycling.com. And then if you want to visit Expedition Air, it's expeditionair.today. So more information there about the consumer products and where to reach us.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Madison. And thank you so much, everyone, for joining. And I'll see you back here next Wednesday at 12 p.m. Mountain Time.
Awesome. Thank you.